ọmọdé wọ̀nyí kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
A ní wọ́n kéré o, wọ́n kéré o, wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa, àwọn ọmọdé wọ̀nyí kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Not because I suffer fast, not because I pray and fast. No be your show, no be that. I'm watching. Daily, Osinachi, Namnukwa, Osinachi. One man, Osinachi, I'm watching. Daily, Osinachi, Mama, Osinachi.
A ní wọ́n kéré o, wọ́n kéré o, wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa, àwọn ọmọdé wọ̀nyí kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Not because I suffer fast, not because I pray and fast. No be your show, no be that. I'm watching. Daily, Osinachi, Namnukwa, Osinachi. One man, Osinachi, I'm watching. Daily, Osinachi, Mama, Osinachi.
A ní wọ́n kéré o, wọ́n kéré o, wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa, àwọn ọmọdé wọ̀nyí kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Not because I suffer fast, not because I pray and fast. No be your show, no be that. I'm watching. Daily, Osinachi, Namnukwa, Osinachi. One man, Osinachi, I'm watching. Daily, Osinachi, Mama, Osinachi.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Hello, can you hear me? While we are waiting for the share of this panel,
Can hear you.
I think panelists can start introducing themselves while we wait for the share is here. The share is here.
I want to just have to share the screen.
I guess the panel shell is having issues with our network.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you all hear me? Oh,
Yeah,
okay. All right. My name is Helen Uga. I'm actually one of the panelists in this panel. But while we are waiting for our chair to overcome our internet challenges, I will fill in for her until she returns. Okay, all right. So good afternoon, everybody, once again. My name is Helen Uga from LSA University, Laramoki, Nigeria. Welcome to the panel on gender in history, arts, and literary culture. The panelists for this session are Olugbemi Jayoba. Okay, Jayobo. Okay, we'll be talking about, we'll be presenting on customary law and everyday life in Southern Nigeria. Michael Adetunji and John Obi will be presenting on feminist dimension. Okay, I think our chair is here. Dr. Bauer, can you hear us? Hello, Dr. Bauer. Okay, I think she's still trying to. Okay, she's still trying to log in. So the third presenter is Oladipupo Olubodi, presenting on women and educational development in colonial Lagos. After which, Ineoma Onweguchi will be presenting on women as agents of change, the fashion politics of Nigeria.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Nigeria's May Barbie. Okay, I think we can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you. I think others can hear you too. So you can
hear me
proceed
now. Hello? Okay. Okay. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Hey, doctor.
Good evening, ma.
It's like the network of the Tabao is not stable.
Very sorry, I appeared very late. Hello. Hello.
We can hear you, although your network appears to be very poor.
LSA.
Dr. Uga, I think you need to take over from here. We've gone 30 minutes already in the time allotted for this session.
All right. Can we have the first panelist, Olugbemi Jayoba from Achievers University? Over to you, Dr. Jayoba.
Good afternoon. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Clearly.
Oh, thank you very much.
Clearly.
Oh, thank you.
I'm sorry. Before you proceed, I think I would like to say at this point that you have, since the appears we spent some of our time already, I think, how many of us are here? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 12 minutes.
12 minutes.
12 minutes. Your time starts now.
Did you see me also? Did you see me also there?
Pardon?
when you're counting, did you see me there? I want to share my slides to email, please.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon. My title is Customary Law and Everyday Life in Southern Nigeria. I begin by saying that even though there is an increased number of persons getting educated, there is heavy subscription to different religious beliefs, customs and customary law is still very dominant in the lives of citizens and residents of Southern Nigeria, from naming new babies to designating market days, conducting marriage ceremonies, conducting burial ceremonies, determining who inherits what portion of the property of the deceased. Custom and customary law is still very much in vogue. To us in the legal profession, the customary law is seen as, is understood as being the mirror of accepted usage. That is, acceptance by the people is a major criterion for the enforcement of customary law. However, beyond recognition of the custom as binding by the people, there are three main standards introduced by the colonial authorities for to determine validity of customary law. The first one is that the custom or the customary law must not be repugnant to natural justice, equity, and good conscience. The second is that it must not be contrary to any written law. And the third is that it must be in conformity with public policy. Now, 60 years after independence, these three criteria are still in the statute books and still enforced by the courts. In view of the time constraint, I will only be I will give attention to the first. That is, customary law should not be repugnant to natural justice, equity, and good conscience. Now, somehow, the legislature in Nigeria have not been able to achieve a unification of customary law into the received law to form an authentic Nigerian law. So as we speak today, we have multiple streams of law. The laws enacted by the legislature, the customary law, and then in the north we still have Islamic law. So from time to time we have conflict of laws arising. And what I'm going to pay attention to this afternoon, in light of the characterization of this panel, is to demonstrate how the courts have implemented this validity requirement on customary law to enforce women's rights in Southern Nigeria. So if I move on, I want to say that customary law is both ancient and modern. So even though customary law must be shown to have been in existence in a given society over a period of time, the courts require that at the time of litigation, it must still be recognized as the law amongst the people. In other words, customary law must be ancient and current. So it could have its history in time immemorial, it could have its history in times past, but it must be at the time of investigation still being recognized by the people as a mirror of usage. Now, what is the purpose of this doctrine of repugnance? Even though it was introduced by the English colonial rulers as a tool to bring customary law in conformity with English law, but over time, the courts have modified the interpretation of the repugnancy doctrine, and it can really be said today that the colonial vestiges has been removed, and we can say that the repugnancy doctrine is being applied by the courts to bring customary law in conformity with the Constitution. If you could just permit me, I'll read briefly what was said by the Supreme Court in 1991 on the essence of the doctrine of repugnancy. The court said customary laws were formulated from time immemorial. As our society advances, they become more removed from the roots in which those laws were created. And the customary laws now need to be addressed to situations which were inconceivable at the time that the laws came into existence. That the doctrine of repugnancy affords the court the opportunity for fine-tuning customary law to meet changed social conditions where necessary, and especially as there's no forum for repealing or amending customary law. Since there is no formal legislature that works on customary law at the customary law level, once it gets worked upon by the House of Assembly or the National Assembly, then it changes character from customary law to statutory law. But whilst it remains in the domain of customary law, there is no legislature, there is no authority that can really amend in the way we know law to be amended. Therefore, the courts now assume that position to help bring customary law in conformity with with new social expectations. Let me just move quickly into ways in which the courts have brought customary law in line with the Constitution and modernity. First of all, let me go to section 42 of subsection 1 of the 1999 Constitution, which provides that a citizen of Nigeria shall not be made subject to discrimination on the basis of ethnicity, sexual orientation, or any other reason. So that's the provision that prohibits discrimination against persons. And with respect to inheritance in traditional society, many societies over time have tended to favor sons above daughters. And in the case of Mujeku and Mujeku, the issue was the Oli Ekpe custom in Inewi. And the question and the issue was that a woman who did not give birth to a son could not inherit property of a late husband. And this custom was challenged in the court, and it went as far as the Supreme Court of Nigeria. And at the Supreme Court, it was said that we do not need to travel to Beijing to know that some of our customs, including this Inewu custom, are inconsistent with civilized world and are inconsistent with the Constitution. In that case, the court declared that customary law to be repugnant to natural justice, equity, and good conscience. In another case, the woman was denied the appellant submits to the court that the woman should not be allowed to testify on the issue of title to land simply because of her gender. And the court had no difficulty in that case in declaring that that custom that prohibited a person from testifying in court simply on the basis of her gender was contrary to natural justice, equity, and good conscience. Let me come to the issue of headship and chieftaincy, which could easily be assumed to be a male affair. When the head of the family, the status of the head of the family, and it's interesting that we have about 3 or 4 Supreme Court cases that have declared that headship of a family is not the sole prerogative of males. That even in Lagos and in the entire Yoruba land, that a woman can attain that status if that woman is the eldest child of the deceased. And
You
I
have 2
here,
minutes more, sir.
Oh, 2 minutes
You
more.
have
Thank
2
you
minutes
very
left.
much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And I found that very interesting. And what reinforced my interest in that was when the Alaafin of Oyo died a few months ago. And it was shown to us that in history there has been a female Alaafin, and that was just mind-boggling for me, that if a woman can assume the stool of Alaafin of Oyo, then how come we tend to project customary law as putting women in a second place? And that's part of the role that the courts play to look at what is being proposed as customary law and look at where the world is, what the Constitution says, and bring alignment to alignment between customary law and the Constitution. So in conclusion, I will say that from a review of case law in the past 60 years, the courts have been consistent in enhancing the rights of women and bringing women at par with men in the application of customary law in southern Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Can we have Michael Adetunji and John Obi do their presentation? Okay, I don't think any one of them is present.
Like they're not on ground.
Okay, they're not on ground. Okay. Oladipupo, you have the floor.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Just give me. Okay. Yes, good afternoon, sirs.
All right, so you have 12 minutes, so your time starts now.
Okay, my name is Oladipupo from the University of Lagos. I'm presenting a paper titled Women and Educational Development in Colonial Lagos. This study contributes to the existing literature on African women and their contributions to the society in pre-colonial and colonial Africa. And it is an attempt to reinterpret an aspect of the African past in order to include the silent or ignored contributions of Nigerian women to educational development in colonial Lagos. And when we're talking about education, the scope of this study goes beyond formal education to also include informal education. And I'm sure we all know the difference between formal, informal, and non-formal education. So this study will therefore discuss the various contributions of women to the educational development of Lagos in the colonial period. And it is structured as follows. Introduction, which I just did, the women and contributions to education in pre-colonial Lagos and Nigeria. The third section will be two major groups of women in early colonial Lagos. And second to the last section will be women and contributions to educational development in Lagos. And then we have our conclusion. One thing you must notice is that education in the pre-colonial period was informal and about indigenous knowledge. It was very functional, it was to serve the needs of the individual and the society. And we've heard a lot that women were trained for motherhood and to take care of their families. But they were not restricted to that role alone. Some of them participated actively in politics, in the economic life of their societies, and even in the sociocultural life of their society. Politically, we have people like Queen Bakwaturuk, the mother of Queen Amina. We have Queen Amina, we have Moremi, we have Princess Inipi, and so on and so forth. And some of these women, Madam Tinumbu, and some of these Efunshetson and Iwura, and some of these women participated actively in the economic life of their societies. And we have women that were healers, priestesses, diviners, birth attendants, farmers, traders, weavers, and so on and so forth. And they were also involved in long and short distance trade. In the east, in the southeast, you had women that were actively involved in production of palm oil and palm kernel, and they were also involved in trading this, and then in the processing of fish and salt. You have that in the coastal areas, including Lagos, which is our focus. In the north, you have women who are also involved in the processing of food, and a lot of scholars, women, they've studied women from pre-colonial times. For example, Bonalia, where you have Larry Genza, you have Wanjo Achibi, and so on and so forth. But one thing successful men in the past they had in common was that they had followers and trainees who learned from them. And even if they were at home, they still trained their male and female children on how to conform to the dictates, to the norms of the society. And some of these women, they contributed additional source of income to their household. Now in Lagos, you have Faji Milola. She founded Oja Itafaji, a market that is named after her. And women were equally involved in the religious life of their community, even of the urban, of the palace, I mean. No urban could be installed or buried without having certain priestesses there. Then you have the Market Women Association in the pre-colonial period. And Alimotu Pelewura, who feel is very influential in Badon, also had great influence in Lagos. So women were very active in the pre-colonial period. Now, two major groups of women in early colonial Lagos. We had the indigenous and the returnee women. The indigenous women were the early settlers in Lagos and migrants from the interior land. The returnee women, or we call them the patriots, were former slaves and their children from Sierra Leone, Brazil, and Cuba. Because of our limited time, I don't want us to go, we won't go deep into this. But with time, what matters is that some of these people, the returnees and indigenous people, they intermarried, thus bringing about a much more integrated Lagos. But they all had influence, and that is where we are going to now, women and their contributions to regional development in Lagos. The first contribution was that women passed on their trading skills to their wards and to their servants, to those who came under them as apprentices. For example, we had Madame Tinumbu, who was involved in the trade of slaves, firearms, cotton, and so on and so forth, and had many servants. And these servants, some of them later went on to establish their own enterprise, after their own businesses, after learning from her. Then we had formal education for indigenous children. Which was brought in by the colonial government, and also the repatriates, the returnees played an important role in bringing about formal education to Nigeria, to Lagos, for the indigenous children, and we had a lot of them that became literate. Then equal education for boys and girls. We had the Lagos Women's Organization that clamored for equal education for boys and girls. So the issue of gender equality is not just today, it has been there in the past. And because of this equal clamor for equal education for boys and girls, Queen's College was established in 1927, as we had so many boys only schools in Lagos before that time. Now we must know that Queen's College itself was formerly known as Government Secondary School for Girls, Lagos, before it was renamed Queen's College. Then women also clamored for higher education for girls, especially from the late 1880s. And these Lagos girls that were trained in England later became trainers themselves on their return to Lagos, because the higher education couldn't be found here. So they sent them to to finishing schools in Britain, where they learned. And some of them, when they came back, they also became trainers themselves. And in doing that, there was exposure for these girls, and a lot of women were actually interested in the higher education for their children. And there was also the support for reforms in education, particularly from the era of cultural nationalism in Lagos in the late 19th century. So because of that discrimination, a lot of people faced, particularly the returnees that felt that were already Europeanized. They felt, let us return back to our culture. And because of that, they had to bring down reforms to the education that was being practiced in Nigeria then. And that education was meant to reflect the culture of the people and the needs of the African, of Lagosians and the African people. Also, women served as teachers in various government schools and in the missionary schools. Another interesting thing was that they educated Lagosians through music and drama. There was a quote from the book Victorian Lagos, and it says, "Native women are apt at song making. Every event of interest is, as it were, recorded on the memory of these people in this way." And one could almost produce a history of any locality by compiling the many songs which from day to day are on the lips of women and children. So they were very much involved in music. I'm sure their music, they educated people in the society. They talked about morals and they talked about the history of their community. And the women were actively involved in this, even in dramas. You know, because there was another quote also from the record. That was a newspaper in the colonial period. In addition, they had well-established drama festivals and masquerades, which provided regular entertainment of near professional quality. And it wasn't just the native women or the indigenous women. We had instrumentalists and writers, amongst the returnees. Many of them played the piano, so many of them played the guitar, and many of them were writers. So these people, through their art, they're able to educate the people of Lagos in the colonial period. So the object of their performances of the women, together with their male counterparts, was to elevate the moral and intellectual tone of the masses. So women are also involved in policy making. The first commission of 1921 was actually consulted with women too. Women were active participants during that particular deliberation. And the returning women, they introduced new skills, crafts, occupations, and lifestyle to the indigenous women of Lagos. You had something like baking, catering, laundering, dressmaking, teaching, and some of these things that were being done before, they brought in new ways of doing them. And some women even founded schools in Lagos. You had people like Mrs. Jumoke Obasa, you have Lady Olayinka Ajasa, Mrs. Felicia Ayodele Wright, and even Mrs. Edwin Cole. And another thing is that some women also clamor for the establishment of secondary schools for girls. And out of these women organizations, the women that they had some organizations, some of these organizations, the notable ones were the Lagos Women's League. And the Rosebud Club was also another women's organization. And then you had the Ladies Progressive Club, and amongst other women, but these three were very prominent in terms of what? In terms of clamoring for the establishment of secondary schools.
I'm sorry to cut you short. You have 2 minutes left.
Okay. So we have too many, like they also have been raising funds for female secondary education. We have Lady Monica Bayomi and Mrs. Ayomanua playing prominent roles in this thing, even raised up to £1,000, which they gave to the Nigerian government. And there were other contributions that they did. But what matters, the conclusion from all of this is that it is clear that the study of women, it is clear from the study that women actually played an active role in the educational development of Lagos, whether formally or informally. Therefore, it is very important that their contributions should be given more voice. Because when we do that, we're able to extract an aspect of the African past, which involves what the role of women. And even though this might not be the political, economic, or cultural contributions, it is very important that we discuss more of other contributions that women made in society. For example, like education, which we just did. Because without education, the political, economic, and social fabric of the society cannot stand. So many thanks for listening. I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I hope I'll have time to ask you questions at the end of this.
Okay.
All right. So can we have Inyoma present, please?
Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Norma Onwebuchi, and I'm a graduate student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I would like to share my screen. I hope that works, but if it doesn't, I would revert to a plan B. Okay. Okay, so my paper is tentatively entitled Women as Agents of Social Change, the Fashion Politics of Nigeria's Male Barbie. And just to give us a brief context of where I'm working, where my research is situated in, it's situated in Lagos, Nigeria. And Nigeria is the largest, it's a country in West Africa. And historically, we gained our independence on 1st of October 1960. We have 3 major ethnic groups and about 250 other ethnic groups. And we also have like multiple languages. Religiously, we have 2 major religions, Islam, Christianity, and then we have the African traditional religion. And then we also have people who identify as atheists or non-practicing religion. So having given us that very brief context about where my research is situated, I would move on to, okay, so I'm trying to see how this works. Okay, so I would move on to Nigeria's Male Barbie, my research itself. So Women as Agents of Social Change, Fashion Politics of Nigeria's Male Barbie. So the Nigerian media dubs trans woman Idris Okuneye as Male Barbie. She goes by the name Bobrisky on social media platforms, where she chronicles her experience as a trans woman in glitzy, fashionable outfits. Bobrisky has 3 million followers on Snapchat, and her Instagram handle at Bobrisky222 attracts 4.5 million followers, at least the last time I checked, who actively engage with her sartorial styling posts and purchase her skin lightening cream, Bob Whitening Cream. After her gender reassignment surgeries, she sparked controversies through radical posts on social media that highlighted her bodily transformation. For example, in Instagram posts, she showed her new buttock implants during a massage section and a much lighter skin than usual when getting a full body scrub. The implication being that she had lightened her skin with chemical substances. Bobrisky's large followership is remarkable in that she lives in an ultra-conservative culture. Prevalent homophobia makes West Africa a hostile environment for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer questioning LGBTQ people. Such intolerance is an artifact of colonialism. For example, Hausa men in northern Nigeria who sexually desire other men were widely accepted before European invasion. Yet Bobrisky lives in a Nigeria that's had a same-sex prohibition law since 2014, and she has suffered verbal harassment and physical and sexual assault due to this intolerant environment. Considering that queer intolerance in Africa is a recent phenomenon, as evinced by Mark Epper's position on pre-colonial African societies, where same-sex practices were considered as being relatively humane and respectful of the dignity of the persons involved, then the criminalization of queer erotic desires follows the exportation of queerphobia from Europe to Africa through religious laws, specifically through Christianity and Islam. In post-colonial Nigeria, because of co-construction by political elites, several queer individuals appropriate strategies that enable them to confront the country's antagonism. Not only do they lash back at Nigeria's conservatism through verbal call-out on social media, but they also embody feminized sartorial sophistication on Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube, TikTok. Amongst post-colonial African countries that criminalize same-sex practices, Nigeria ranks as one of the most queerphobic. On 7 January 2014, President Goodluck Jonathan passed the same-sex prohibition bill into law with a penalty of 14 years imprisonment for those engaged in same-sex practices and 10 years imprisonment for witnesses to such unions. This harsh law that derives its footing from a heteronormative framework is responsible for the self-exile of some queer individuals living in Nigeria, such as BC Alini and Unomo as well, both of whom in separate interviews revealed that they faced major setbacks owing to their open identifications as queer, and as such had to relocate to the United Kingdom and United States of America, respectively. Now, these narrative accounts of self-exiled queer individuals allude to Nigeria's punitive governmental laws. However, they do not present or represent a uniform narrative of the queer terrain in Nigeria. My stance is against the backdrop that there are several other similarly vulnerable queer Nigerians residents in the country who navigate aggressions daily through and beyond sartorial practices. And a laudable example would be Bobrisky, a former cross-dresser, now trans woman, resident in Nigeria who embodies emancipated femininity and navigates sociocultural constraints through dress in digital platforms. So it becomes important to note here that my intention behind paralleling Bobrisky, Alimi, and Ozwa is not to downplay the self-exilic lived experiences of the latter two, but to demonstrate that self-exile is not the only route that queer individuals in Nigeria take to combat antagonism. In my exploration of Bobrisky's fashion politics, I argue that her clothing and beauty rituals in digital media platforms enable her to consolidate queer visibility and be both an agent and a victim of social media capitalism. By social media capitalism, I mean the use of digital media platforms to accumulate a surplus monetary value. Nigerian online users have attacked Bobrisky in the local pidgin. Bobrisky don't turn woman to get money, which translated means she has become a woman to make money. At the same time, Bobrisky employs personal digital assistants to promote her glitzy fashion styles, and thus she is a job creator in a weak economy. These are the key questions that guide this paper. 1, what does Bobrisky's fashion politics say about social media as a tool of resistance and economic empowerment for LGBTQ people in the global south, specifically trans women? What features of social media platforms does Bobrisky employ to promote a vision of emancipation? And do these features simultaneously heighten her vulnerability? 3, how does Bobrisky's fashion politics differ from other cis women fashion influencers like Toke Makinwa? Lastly, owing to the global reach of digital media platforms, how does Bobrisky inspire her diasporic audience to similarly draw ideas of African beauty from her beauty practices, despite her fashion being symbolic of the Euro-American Barbie figure? In other words, in what ways does she indigenize the global icon of the Barbie figure of feminine beauty? So by engaging these questions, my project expands research by scholars of African queerness, like Velu Villan, Ashley Correa, Paul Onanuga, Nwasika, and Kamiga B. However, these critics have hardly addressed the roles of fashion and beauty rituals in mediating queer prominence, which powerfully shape queer identities locally in Nigeria and globally. Against this backdrop, my paper hopes to contribute to the burgeoning field of African queer studies, as well as gender and sexuality studies. So my methodology. I conducted preliminary research on the fashion politics of Bobrisky from November to December 2020. During this period, I engaged in informal preliminary interviews with my research collaborator, Bobrisky, familiarizing her with the nature and scope of my research. Although I shared my intent to formally interview her and critically engage with her posts on Instagram and Snapchat, Bobrisky could only participate in short interviews, 30 minutes each, because of her busy schedule. Therefore, her digital archives proved valuable in situating my master's research, which I plan to turn into my PhD thesis within existing scholarly conversations, specifically the intersection between queerness, clothing, and social media in Africa. To complete this project, I'm currently in Lagos, and I'm going to source more oral interviews with Bobrisky and other narrators, specifically queer individuals, from June to August, and then in following years. I've chosen Lagos as a site for gathering these oral sources, mostly because it is the melting pot of Nigeria. More so, it is also the city where Bobrisky resides, so I stand the chance of engaging with her commercial footprint on the Nigerian landscape. So this brings me to the Barbie figure. The image of the Barbie, an icon of idealized feminine beauty, continues to be a source of interrogation within academia, especially regarding its cultural and gendered dimensions. As a cultural and political icon, the Barbie doll carves a unique niche in the arguments of feminist scholars, some of whom celebrate its emancipatory bent, while others disavow its negativist body politics. One of such scholars who disavows this, the negative body politics of the Barbie figure is Chinyere Okafor. And she argues that the Barbie doll figure, or the Barbie doll image as a global index of beauty, impinges on Nigerian standards of beauty. She maintains that the celebration of the Barbie doll as a universal frame of reference adversely affects Nigerian women's self-perception of their unique and varying modes of feminine appearances. Another critic who talks about the Barbie figure is Tulinsky. And Tulinsky maintains that the enduring popularity of the doll and the particular ways it has changed in response to certain cultural concerns speaks to how cultural icons both come to embody and transform social meaning and power. My argument is in line with Tulinsky, and I say that Bobrisky's fashion politics at her initial cross-dressing phase and a later transition to the aesthetics of a trans woman highlights the transformative power of such cultural icons, specifically how these icons enable her to assert a vision of emancipated femininity on Instagram and Snapchat, while also making possible the consolidation of queer visibility in a hyper-religious society like Nigeria. So in other words, while I acknowledge in this paper the new imperial origin of the Barbie figure, I embrace and work with this concept to elaborate the emancipatory dimension of Bobrisky's fashion politics. Within online and offline Nigerian social circles, Bobrisky is popularly referred to as male Barbie or Shin, a compound coinage of the pronouns she and him. Such erroneous pronoun usage, to me, tracks closely with the violence inherent in the English language. Recently, Oga Sabinos, a popular Nigerian comic influencer, referred to Bobrisky as she, to which she, Oga Boss rather, to which she replied in the line of, "I will have you arrested." This kind of violence, linguistic violence, alludes to colonial aftermaths, which heightened Bobrisky's precariousness on social media. It also shows how several online and offline spectators struggle to identify her outside the heteronormative gendered boxes of male and female. Bobrisky referred to as male Barbie is also informed by her pendulous identities on social media platforms. In one of such peculiar instances of gender fluctuation, she was captured dressed as a male, wearing a face cap and black jalabia.
Excuse me, you have 2 minutes. You have 2 minutes left.
All right, thank you. With no makeup to a family meeting. And in defense of why she dressed like a man, she said that there is nothing wrong with what I'm wearing. I wore a face cap and a black jalabia. Now, in the face of such shifting identities, another question I'm sitting on is, or questions I'm sitting on are, is Bobrisky involved in these pendulous identities because she wants to inspire anxiety amongst her spectators? Is she through these shifting identities drawing attention to how trans women's lives are looked on constantly as sites for solving the inherent crisis of heteropatriarchy in post-colonial Nigeria? From these questions, I argue that Bobrisky's fashion politics calls out the hypocrisy of hegemonic heterosexuality, which constantly polices trans women's bodies as solutions to the problem of what Tejumola Olaniyan refers to as the post-colonial incredible state. In conclusion, I argue that such close and constant monitoring of Bobrisky's fashion politics and gender shifts differentiate her beauty practices from cis women fashion influencers like Doke Makiwa, who do not suffer as much policing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know if Dr. Bawa is back, so she can take over the panel and give me the permission to present my paper.
I guess you still have to present as chair. You're welcome. I don't think she's back with us.
All right. Okay, thank you very much.
Yes.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me clearly. I'm Helen Uga, and I'm presenting on the topic titled Gender Othering in Public Spaces, Discursive Construction of Street Harassment in Nigeria. Now, this topic is slightly different from what is in the program. I made some adjustments after, in the process of doing the research. Please permit me to play this audio before I proceed with my presentation.
About a month ago in PH where I reside, I was actually heading towards my school one fateful morning. On my way to my school, there was this guy that walked past me. Then he grabbed my boobs. I was really angry. I was very furious. Then I turned to look at him, and he looked at me like as if he was going to beat me or something. Then I told him he's very useless, that he does not have sense. Then he asked me what I said. Then I said I repeated it, and a guy, like I think a driver or so, told him to go. That if he does not go, that they were going to beat him here. Yeah, that's it.
All right. The clip you just listened to is called from the data I used from this study. Now that narrative gives us a perception of women's everyday experiences in public spaces. Now, public spaces is has been known, okay, has been turned a space of violence as a result of social, cultural, economic, social, spatial, and political factors that give some people edge over some others. What I'm trying to say is that public spaces, as should I say, the custodian of violence, is a space where unequal power relations is at play. Now we can take public spaces to be a typical maybe primary school classroom where some kids assume to be more powerful than others and naturally become bullies. So I argue in this study that males can be perceived as the bullies of public spaces. Now, violence occurs, like I said earlier on, occurs in several public spaces, and not just in public spaces, but various contexts of human contacts. But which is most common in public spaces as a result of the fact that people, there are several categories of people in public places, and when there are so many people, you tend to see humans with diverse character and behavioral traits. Victims of public space violence are mostly women. That is not to say that men are not victims of public space violence. Women are victims because they are most often scrutinized and policed in public spaces because of their bodies and their choice of clothing. The scrutiny and policing of females in public spaces is most often the foundation of street harassment. Now, many Nigerian streets are heterogeneous because Nigeria, of course, is a multilingual and multi-ethnic community where we have a multilingual, multi-ethnic, and maybe we can say multi-religious community. As a result of these factors, there are people of divergent beliefs, identity, education, level of education, upbringing in many Nigerian streets. Now, if that is the case, no, since that it is the case, I would say that the heterogeneity of Nigerian streets contributes to the scrutiny and the policing that women experience. Nigerian women have disparate identities as well as their appearance and personal ideologies based on how educated they are, their educational qualification, religious exposure, personal beliefs, and the rest of all that. But findings from my study or findings from literature of the study has come to as portray that um, it doesn't matter what a woman wears. If a man deemed her worthy to be harassed in public, she will be harassed. So that brings us to the notion of street harassment. Street harassment has been termed different names by researchers. It has been termed men's intrusions, Eid season, public intrusion, stranger harassment, sexual harassment, public space harassment. But for the purpose of my study, I define it as any form of unsolicited male attention in public spaces. So when I say public space or I say streets, I mean the same thing. I'm not talking of streets in the notion of the name of where somebody's house is located. So when I say street and I say public space, I'm actually talking about the same thing, space where humans interact in the public. Now, street harassment ranges from mild actions like staring, commanding a female to smile, unwanted touching, car honking, verbal harassment, like now you get this thing, only you carry all this one, kissing noises, over friendliness, and command to smile. It also cuts across extreme reaction like groping, lewd comments, public masturbation or indecent exposure, physical abuse, physical violence, sexual violence, and in some very extreme cases, yeah, sexual violence. Now, aside the fact that street harassment is gender-based, it could transcend the male-female gender violence to include homophobia, Islamophobia, homophobia, and transphobic form of abuse. Street harassment, like I said earlier on, is very common in public spaces like bars, like on the road, in commercial transportation, on the streets, regular streets, and the rest of all that. It is actually a global phenomenon, all right? It's a global phenomenon experienced by women in many countries of the world, whether they're staying in urban or rural areas. As a result of it, it is the most quotidian it is the most pervasive form of quotidian violence against women in public spaces. It is trivialized, it is normalized, so much so that nobody sees any wrong in females being harassed. As a result of the trivialization and normalization of this form of violence, women sometimes have to factor it into their daily experiences or into their daily navigation of public spaces. Don't forget the fact that I said earlier on that public space, this form of violence is usually perpetrated by men, and it is a form of hegemonic masculinity that inhibits women's visibility in public space. That is not to say women do not harass other women in public spaces. Studies on violence have examined why men perpetrate violence against women, and findings from these studies have seem to suggest that men harass women in public spaces because they feel that they own the streets. They feel that they own the streets, and women shouldn't be seen in the streets. So it's a notion of women being invisible in public spaces. And studies have also investigated the impact of street harassment on females, the nature and context of street harassment on women, the social meaning of women experiences of street harassment, as well as perpetrators' perception of their engagement in street harassment. Findings from these studies have shown that women also perpetrate harassment of other women, but this form of their own harassment is usually directed at commercial sex workers, and it is most often a form of self-reassurance to locate themselves as moral women. Male perpetrators of street harassment are usually verbal and physical in the harassment of women, and it could be, in some cases, a precursor to sexual violence. So in this study, I investigated how the discursive construction of experiences of sexual harassment by women who have experienced this. I I investigate how women construct their experience, how they narrate their experiences of street harassment, and some of the sociocultural factors that come into play in their narration. Now, the data for this study was solicited via WhatsApp. I solicited for women's narrative on street harassment on my WhatsApp. Now, my WhatsApp status, I asked my female friends who are on my contact list to share their street harassment experiences with me as voice notes and sent to me. I also encouraged some friends of mine to put it on their status, after which I got about 30, about 30 recorded WhatsApp recorded experiences of street harassment. Now, the data I got was analyzed basically using Lasers feminist critical discourse analysis, which provides a lens with which to investigate unequal power and social relations as perpetrated through the use of language. The aim of feminist critical discourse analysis is to transform and emancipate women from gender subjugation. So this theory provides a tool with which to resist gender inequality through the creation of new ways of thinking and writing about women in different contexts of violence. Now, these findings from my study demonstrates that women also conceptualize the harassment experiences as normal. So, like I said earlier on, as much as street harassment is a pervasive form of quotidian violence against women, women also normalize it. Why do I say so? Sometimes they don't pay attention to it. They consider it as part of their everyday experiences. Like one of my respondents said, here now, she says, the regular grabbing that guys do on the road, right? Now, grabbing in all sense of the word should not be considered normal. It is a violation of one's private space as well as one's body. But this respondent sees it as normal. She also goes further to say that mine is out of the ordinary because they will now be saying nasty things like, I like to suck your breast and the rest of all that. But I also argue that normalizing this form of violence or female normalization of this form of violence is a way of fortifying themselves from the shock of it. Although the normalization does not take away the embarrassment, the violation, or the feeling of being violated that comes with it. Embedded in this discourse of normalization is the notion of victimhood and vulnerability. That means that women consider themselves as victims or as vulnerable humans in public spaces. That goes on to show that they are helpless in public spaces. Now, as part of the response to public space harassment, the respondents' findings from the narrative shows that females' response to street harassment is shaped and facilitated by societal notions of gender norms. Normally in a public space, the guy talks to you anyhow, you're just expected to ignore him and keep quiet, because if he decides to retaliate or talk back at him or do something, you could get beaten. So most women factor that into their reaction. So when they react there are three ways women react to public space harassment. They either ignore or they retaliate. The retaliation can be physical or verbal. Like one of my respondents said, narrated an experience of giving a guy a knock on his head because he touched a buttock while she was trying to alight from a vehicle. In her opinion, she didn't plan it. It just came. It was more like a reflex action. Okay. One other respondent said that she usually thinks twice before she reacts. She doesn't go physical. She most often go verbal. But before she talks, she watches the terrain and think of what could happen if she decides to insult the guy. So women think twice about how they react to men when men harass them because they don't want to be manhandled or probably beaten in public spaces. Now, in their construction of their street harassment experiences, the respondent constructed bystanders in different ways. Bystanders can either be saviors, complicit in the harassment experiences, or totally uninvolved. Now, female bystanders often do not openly express their opposition to the harassment because they don't want to become victims themselves, okay? So they rather just subtly give the victim maybe encouragement, that is, she wants to react, or tell her to continue her journey, to continue with whatever she's doing, or just walk away. They do this subtly because they don't want to become they don't want to receive attention from the perpetrator. But male bystanders are most often perpetrators, but in some very few cases, saviors. As perpetrators, they collaborate with other men to just to emphasize their male loyalty. So it's like a pack thing. A member, just like a pack of dogs, when one barks, the others follow. So the same thing happens to men in public space. When a man harasses a female, other men there, especially commercial transport workers, they re-echo the harassment and makes it last longer. Now, male as saviors during harassment incidences.
I hope to have time to present our own work.
I think I'm the last presenter on this panel. Are you supposed to be on this panel?
Yes, they brought me here today from the other funnel. That's why you saw me on the funnel list there.
Okay, let me quickly conclude my work.
I should present after you, I think.
All right, lastly, I would like to say that the participants sometimes blame their bodies for the cause of the harassment. Like one of the participants says, I am on the big side, so I've heard people on the road shout, "Uku," or bike riders fall into gutters because they were whistling at me. Some other person says, I have seen slim girls being harassed, and I've come to realize that it's not just about the size of my bust or bum, but I know that because my physical features are prominent, I easily get harassed in comparison to other females. I argue here that women's reference to their body size and fashion sense being reasons for the harassment indicates their passive tolerance of it by self-objectification. In conclusion, this study has portrayed that street harassment is a form of hostile sexism, and the study has also been able to demonstrate that women are vulnerable to street harassment and other forms of public space harassment. And this vulnerability increases depending on their age, physical appearance, what they are wearing, as well as in environment in which they find themselves. Street harassment enforces gender inequalities and also induces a climate of fear and insecurity in victims. Thank you very much for listening. Okay, so we'll go to the last speaker, Dr. Mubarak Doko. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't know if I can share the screen. Can I share the screen? That's it there. I'm finding it difficult to share my screen. Okay. Can I speak to the paper? Good evening, everyone. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, good evening.
Can you hear me?
Good evening.
Hi, good evening, Dr. Aisha. My name is Mubarak.
Good evening, Mubarak.
My paper is on insurgency and forced displacement, women peace builders in northern Nigeria. I'm supposed to be on the funnel of gender and women in colonial and post-colonial Nigeria yesterday, but I logged into the audience link. Then later today, the LSA transferred me to this panel. So sorry for being here. It's like I'm not an intruder to the panel.
You are.
I'm a graduate student in the Department of History, Archaeology, and Heritage Studies from Makerere University. So I'm presenting from Makerere University here in Uganda. My paper is trying to bring out the second to last speaker said, the formal and informal participation of women. So here also I'm trying to bring out the contribution of women in peace building as a result of displacement. So many things happened as a result of displacement, but I'm taking 2010 to 2020 as a decade of a research here. But with the background of the violent activities that happened in northern Nigeria, starting from the Metis crisis in the 1980s in Kano and later spread to other states in the northern part of the country, then coming off with the offshoots of the emergence of Boko Haram, then with the lingering crisis of the Jukun, Tif, Hausa and Fulani crisis in Wukari. So basically, I'm trying to look at displacement of three sections: displacement brought by the Boko Haram, displacement brought by the lingering conflict in the Wukari axis, and the last displacement is the displacement brought by the activities of banditry and kidnapping from 2010 to 2020. So, for example, if you look at the crisis of Boko Haram, you find out that the displacement here started early from 2010, even though this strike from 2004, 2009, then 2010, 2012, that was the time when the strike became more evident and more pronounced. So as a result, we have a large number of people displaced across Niger Republic, Chad, and Cameroon. I went for a fieldwork last year in 2021. I went to Maiduguri and I assessed some of these displaced camps and interviewed some women peace builders there, and I saw how they were working. Despite the fact that I said in the introduction of this work that these women peace builders still carry out their activities informally. After that, the government didn't see them like a kind of formal reintegration of their activities, still fighting for an inclusion of their activities in the formal way. So you also find out that the brunt of the suffering comes from the women. Even though the women suffered at least the issue of displacement, still they also participate to bring peace. Then you can also realize that the displacement didn't also allow the women just to hold their arms. They also indeed in the cardinal R, that is the issue of reintegration, the issue of rehabilitation, and the issue of radicalization. I interviewed a woman peace builder in Maiduguri last year, Hajia Hamsatu Alamid, which was called Bama Boko Haram. I met her, I interviewed her. She explained to me how she carried her activities of radicalization. She also explained to me how she engaged in the rehabilitation and the reintegration of the victims, as well as the ex-terrorists into the society, how they were working tirelessly to make sure that peace came through women in that part of the country. I also interviewed a woman called Hafsat Sheikh Sharif Ibrahim Saleh, who also work in that IDP camps where they work in transforming the lives of so many women there. In fact, she told me how they even sent young girls to Morocco for education when they realized that those girls lack proper education. Then the second aspect of the women peace building activities is the issue of the Tip Jikun crisis in Wukari axis. This is a crisis that started possibly since 1960s, probably from 1959 or to 1960s, but it's a crisis that has been there, even though it was not manifest since the 1850s and the 1870s, when the colonialists brought the tips to the Jikun lines for farming activities, where the tips provide the services of farming and also become like the major contributors of tax. So after the colonialists left, then there's an issue of indigenous settler there, which emerged between the Tips and the Jikun, where the Jikun were saying that now you should go back to your land. So that's how the crisis started. Then the issue of political space. So from 1990s to 2000, from 2000, that was when crisis in Ukari become very, very chaotic, very, very dangerous. The Jikuns and the Tips engaged into serious fights, whereby you go to Ukari now, you hardly find at least Tips there. All the Tips in that Ukari were being chased out by the Jikuns, saying that they should go back to their land from where they came from. So you also find another crisis between the Hausas and the Jikuns. Then you find another crisis between the Jikuns and the Fulanis. All I consider it as a kind of land conflict. The central focus of the conflict is land. But after all these issues, the women become more affected, because if you go there, you have to sympathize with the people then in the IDP camps, because this was the first time you have a kind of a humanitarian crisis in that area, where you see a huge number of people being displaced. So here in Wukari, I went there for a field work in Wukari. I interviewed the women peace builders there, how they come up with an idea of enough is enough. The idea of this enough is enough is enough is that
Sorry,
they
Dr.
have
Mubarak, can you finish in 2 minutes so we can have time for deliberation before we are cut off from this platform?
So okay, thank you. Let me rush. So they come with the idea of propagating the idea of peace. Then you come to the issue of the banditry and kidnapping, where also here the women, like in southern part of Kaduna State, I engaged with some women engaged in trauma healing of the victim, especially the women that were being kidnapped by the bandit terrorists. So I interviewed some women people there, how they engage to make the girls who are being kidnapped to speak up, not to hide anything that happened to them, so that they can help them. Thank you so much, and I remain to answer some questions if I need for that. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Does any of the audience has any question for the panelists? Please feel free to post your questions.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hello, yeah, doctor, we can hear you.
I said I'm very sorry for not chairing the session. I've been trying my best. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Helen has also helped also, seriously.
Yes, thank you very much for all panelists. I think I just have a question for Mubarak. Can I go ahead?
Yes, please.
Yeah, Mubarak, I think this is the only presentation that I was able to hear correctly. I don't know the agency in this woman you are talking about. For them to be able to say enough is enough, there must be something behind it. What is that agency in them that motivated them? Do you get my question? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Do you get the question? Yeah, the
question I hear yes.
Yes, the agency,
yes,
there must be something. Yes, there must be something that actually either economic power, you know, or political power, or something that actually united them, that they should be able to fight and stand to say enough is enough. That is the question. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Mubarak, do you want to answer attend to that question?
I suspect he has been knocked out.
Okay. Inyoma, there's a question for you in the chat. Can you see it? Do you want to respond to it?
Oh, yes. I was reading through it and I was muted. So the question says trans visibility as one of the areas where Bob has been an agent of change. And okay, I wonder how, okay. So to that first question, I would say that the responses so far, at least with the interviews I've done with queer individuals, varies. And for some of them, Bob is not doing the work, and some, Bob is doing the work. And I would say that it's okay for, considering that experiences, even among queer people, like vary, that tension, it's okay. Like heterosexual people fight, right? And we don't place that, I mean, that also goes back to the whole thing about policing. And I would also say that BC Alimi says that Bob is not necessarily doing the work. And I would say that that's, to me, it's a bit unfair, because that's like placing a kind of undue burden for Bob to present the queer community in a positive light. And that is something nobody demands, like, for instance, a heterosexual cis woman to represent all heterosexual women in the same way. So lumping, that tension is actually encouraged, and I feel it's important. And then the second question is, I seem to attribute Nigeria's transphobic attitude to colonialism. There are other reasons just as important. Yes, I talked about, maybe I glossed over that, but colonialism, to attribute it to colonialism would be very reductive. right? Because they are co-constructions of homophobia, of transphobia. And one of those is when we have like our laws, and then the lawyer who spoke earlier on talked about customary laws, and that got me thinking about how we can actually appropriate customary laws to not just fight for cis women, but also to extend that to trans women so that they can attain full citizenship. So to answer that question, I would say that we also are also involved in this co-construction, especially elites, and even at the very basic level. So I would say that could be one other reason that we have, or that can be attributed to transphobic environments. But I'm open to several other reasons that you could help me with. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Aisha. The concept of the enough is enough for the women there in Ukari. I interviewed the women across the tribes, like the Jukun women, the Fulani women, the Hausa women, as well as the Tib women. So what they told me is that they are tired of the series of conflicts that have been happening in that Ukari axis. So they decided to team up. In fact, they carried out a protest of enough is enough. They were led by the former Commissioner of Women Affairs from 2015 to 2019. That was the Commissioner, Madam Louis Emmanuel. So she was telling me that they were tired, that their young children, their youths were being killed, their husbands were being killed. So they have enough, a lot of widows there. So they decided to come off and think of to go on a protest on enough is enough. They told me how they went to the beer parlors of begging the youth. She told me how the youth were crying, the elderly were crying, the women also were crying, kneeling down, begging for the youth, like you should drop arms, let's have peace in the region. So that's why from that period of 2015, after now, you didn't have any crisis in that Ukari area because of how the women came off together. In fact, there's another way they also do it. They also go to house, because the way we have crisis in that place, you see, it led to the emergence of segregated quarters. So
All right,
now they team up together and say, okay, enough is enough. Thank you very much.
We have barely 4 minutes, but I have a question for Dr. Jayobo. Are you there, sir?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here, please. Yes.
All right. I think I know someone, you said something about there being an existence of a female Alafin. I don't know if I heard you correctly some years back.
Yes.
Now, do you think that can happen anytime soon or in the nearest future? Like maybe a female Alafin or a female Oni, considering how strong these Yoruba, should I say kingdoms or kinship are?
I must confess, I was shocked when I found that out too. And that really changed my perception of customary law in Yoruba land. The historians, the Oyos, acknowledge that there was a female Alafin. And that just opens up the vista of possibilities. I think it has opened up a whole new set of possibilities. Whether we will be able to embrace those possibilities, that is another question. But history has it for us. Yeah, but somebody has put it in the chat box, says Orompoto. That was her name. So it had happened before. It could happen again. But it's really a refresher to all of us that customary law embraces everybody and puts us all on the same level. Thank you.
All right, we have barely 2 minutes. I have a question for Inyoma. Inyoma, you said in your presentation that Bobrisky is a victim. I'd like to know how is a victim on the one hand. Then on the other hand, what can you say about Bobrisky's large followership on social media, especially in consideration of the homophobia at play in Nigeria? Can you say it makes Nigerians hypocrites? And just before you go, before you give answers to that question, I have a question for Oladipupo. Now you said that women were very active in pre-colonial, or is it colonial Nigeria, right? what is the implication of their activism on their domestic life? So you may want to answer that in less than 1 minute so that Inyoma can answer a question before the will log us out.
Okay, hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, okay. You said the implications of their activisms on their domestic life. And when I'm talking about being active now, I'm talking about in education. So that was what so let us first of all, that should be understood first of all, ma. And the implication, I've not done much research into it, but like I said, they were very involved. For example, I told you how many of them even disturb their husbands, that their children have to go to the finishing schools in Britain, just for their girls to have higher education, and even for their male children, that they must have education, particularly the indigenous women. Yes, so it also reflected in a way in their homes too.
All right, thank you very much. Inoma, over to you.
Okay, so to your first question, very, very quickly, I think I've already addressed that when Rosemary brought that up. And then the second one, I would say, it would be unfair to say it's Nigerians are hypocritical, but I would say it says a lot about what Nigerians think about vulgarity, what they think about SS, what they think about how they even mirror the states. So I would say, whatever Bobrisky is doing and how people follow her also shows an intimate moment of tyranny. I think that's how Mbembe frames it. An intimate moment of tyranny between post-colonial actors, post-colonial people, and then their government. So yeah, that says a lot about who we are as a people in terms of vulgarity, in terms of excess, and then in terms of play, which can be read as an infra-political gesture. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We've overshot the time allocated to us. At this point, since there is no more, I don't think there's any more question in the, there's no more question in the chat section. I think we can end this panel right now. It was nice meeting every one of you and learning from you. I really did enjoy this panel.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the great job.
Thank you, everyone. I enjoyed the presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Aisha Bauer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Robert. Yes, bye-bye.
Greeting from Kampala. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.